Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. All right. Happy post evening, everybody. And this evening, by request, there was a request to take a look at the nature of enlightenment in Buddhism. And I had hoped to fish around and find a lot of reference suttas to be able to give to everybody, as I would for say like a day long. But even with a couple of days of just pouring through suttas, I found that it's actually very hard to find references. There's a lot of stuff I'm really confident it exists, but I have no idea where or in what context I encountered it. So that will be my caveat saying I'm fairly certain one can find these references. And if one is around long enough, I'm pretty sure one will encounter these references to the various stages of enlightenment and the various nuances. But I'm not able to give like exact references to a lot of it, and I will do my best. But as always, I encourage you. Again, this is this topic especially. You can be inspired. It can arouse faith, but you are not to just believe it. You're not to just say, okay, well, that's what the monk said. It must be true. Because other monks will say other things and other people will have other references. It's entirely possible to get a totally different picture of enlightenment and attainment and all of these ideas. But I'll present what I'm familiar with and what I've encountered in these 18 something years that I've been around doing this Buddhist stuff. Yeah. So enlightenment. I started by looking at the what I, in the early days when translators were first encountering Buddhism. This was English scholars were encountering the Pali Canon and the religion of Southeast Asia, and they're like, oh my goodness, this seems to be related to that Buddhist religion that we thought died out in India. It's wow, it's actually the same religion, and they've preserved the texts, and this is amazing. And they're starting to have discourses with living monastics and realizing, well, this is a whole religion. This is big, yeah, and it's curiously homogeneous and has been preserved in these various ways through the years. But they didn't have language for a lot of the concepts that were suddenly appearing, and one of the concepts was the word ariyā. And in you might have heard this. You might suspect that you've heard this. You might have. There were some people called the Nazis, and they had this symbol, and and they called themselves Aryans. They said we're of the Aryan race, and they were picking up on an idea and perverting an idea that's existed for thousands of years. So the word Arya means noble, and but it's not noble like your nobility, like you're just simply like a well-bred and influential family that has a lineage. Even in the Buddhist time, there was this notion of ancientness and lineage and descending through time, and that there was some like um, really great noble lineage, and it was a blessing to be taken of that lineage. And of course, various people would ascribe to having being of this esteemed lineage, and nobody could agree who exactly was, because again, it was this idea that it was kind of lost into antiquity of who it actually was. But this word Arya got applied to something that the scholars, the English scholars, when they encountered, they're like, what do we do with this? And so, like with a lot of concepts, the words that we have, like mindfulness, they mapped them to Christian ideas, to Catholic ideas. And they said, oh, well, these are the Buddhist saints. And so I looked up the word saint and was like, is that a good match? And it turns out the word saint isn't actually, it's not like a concrete thing, is it? And you look it up and it has five different definitions. And it could mean that somebody who is particularly close to God or somebody who's suffused with divine qualities. And these would be things that maybe you might be born with or you might be predetermined to have based on some cosmic hierarchy. Yeah, but then there's also definitions where it's you are sort of um, named a saint by a religious body, or you acquire this reputation of sainthood through particularly special acts that you do during your life, or miracles that you even do that occur after your life that are associated with you. Um, in Buddhism, the idea of sainthood is kind of curious because we have all of those different definitions exist within the Buddhist faith. But very interestingly, when it comes to enlightenment, there are many translations that will say that this is sainthood. Yeah, the eight kinds of noble beings we call them, the four pairs. This is dealing with the way the Buddha laid out enlightenment. He said it will occur in four distinct verifiable stages. And he further broke them down and he said there will be a path and there will be a fruit. So the actual full enlightenment of each stage is called the fruit. But then preceding it, there will be some sort of path that begins the process of moving towards that fruit. And until the path arises, one is not actually moving towards that fruit. So when you divide it this way, you end up with eight kinds of Buddhist saints. These people who actually have a concrete, verifiable attainment. There is something different about them. And the Buddha used the word ariyā to refer to these people. They are the eight kinds of Aryan beings, the noble ones. And they're all noble ones. It's not just the arahants, the final ones who have reached the end, who are aryas. It's like all eight of these are aryas, because he would say that at the moment that you enter the stream, as he called it, you are of a different lineage. You have changed your relationship to the world, to samsara, to rebirth, to views, to suffering. Yeah. And at this change, it's like you have entered a stream, a body of water, a river. You will be taken downstream whether or not you exert any effort, and you will reach the end of that river. Though you could apply yourself with hands and feet, kicking and splashing around, and get there a lot quicker. Yeah. But what is the stream? Well, the Buddha said very specifically, the stream is this Noble Eightfold Path. So this Noble Eightfold Path is not found in worldly beings who are not destined or bound for enlightenment. But when one enters the stream, it said they've acquired this path. Now, notably, this path cannot exist without right view. The view there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, there is a cessation of suffering, and there is a way to bring about the cessation of suffering. These are the Four Noble Truths, and getting a vision and an understanding of this completely and radically changes your relationship to suffering, but also to all of samsara. There are certain aspects of your being that will concretely change. And this is there's a lot of different ways of handling this. So that in Buddhism we do have sangha bodies. We have sanghas between the monastics, but there's also like officiating bodies in the various Buddhist countries that kind of look over all the different monastics and teachers within that country, and these can give status. They can give you certain ranks, they can give you certain titles. This is not enlightenment. There is no officiating body that can designate you are a certain level of enlightened being. And it's really, really kind of not done. It's slightly taboo. Yeah, though it's not categorically not done. There is this idea in Zen Buddhism of, I think it's called an anka, which is basically like a certificate that your teacher would write that says so and so is enlightened. Remember reading there was this very delightful Zen poet, Ryokan, and he spent, it's like 15, 20 years in a monastery, like training diligently as like a very, you know, well-kept monk. And his teacher finally is like, okay, you're good, you can go off. And he wrote him an enka. He said, you know, you are enlightened. And Ryokan went off and became a hermit for the rest of his life. And he would play marbles with children and like dance with prostitutes. And he was known for being just this really free spirit, but also practicing incredible renunciation and have incredible joy. As I understand it, and as I think it maps, that Enka, that idea of certifying enlightenment, would kind of map very closely to stream entry. Yes, this is not necessarily designating full enlightenment because it would be pretty hard to have like a whole system where you're designating, where arahants are designating other people as arahants and walking around with little certificates. And there have been times in like Theravādā countries where you might get a certificate. You might do a 7-day Satipatthana retreat, and then somebody will write a certificate saying, "Oh, you're a stream enterer. You have entered the stream of the Dhamma." And you might treasure that, just like Ryokan treasured his Enka. It was the only possession he kept throughout all those years of being a hermit. Yeah, despite renouncing, all the other stuff. He's like, "Oh, it's so nice. My teacher kind of sent me off with this." Yeah. But in Buddhism, enlightenment is one of the things that is considered fairly personal. Yeah. It is something that can really only be recognized by somebody who already has that attainment. Yeah, it's only possible to really understand concretely the nature of an attainment once you have that attainment. So it's not something that can be, bestowed upon you by any organization. Um, but that is something to know about it is that the Buddha was very open and very free about like pointing out people's attainments during his time because he was aware of people's attainments. And in the modern day, we have an interesting phenomena where there's a lot of people who've kind of started to lose faith that it's possible to attain enlightenment, or there's various ideas of thinking that it's too hard, or maybe just shoot for stream entry. Anything else is impossible in this day and age. And there are, even in this day and age, certain teachers who've made a point of when they reach a certain level of seniority where it's really not trying to encourage or discourage anybody, but they know that they're ready to pass on and they want to do whatever they can for the next generation. It's been known to happen where they will give talks about their own path of practice and their own attainment of various stages of enlightenment. And they might be explicit or they might be kind of fuzzy around the edges of exactly what this is and what's happening. But the way that they frame it, even though it's slightly taboo to talk about this very personal attainment of a level of enlightenment, the way they frame it is they want people to realize that this is still possible, that everybody has this possibility. And not everybody has like Buddha nature in the sense that we're all destined for enlightenment. They're very clear, like only the people who want enlightenment are destined for enlightenment. Not everybody is headed in that direction, but those who are headed in that direction, yeah, they are made of the same stuff and they have the same capability. And if they apply themselves in the right way with faith and with wisdom, they too can reach these stages of enlightenment. Yeah. And reach this kind of sainthood that even though everybody around you might not really know, still has an effect on the world at large. Like the Buddha was very clear that these people are quite different. They're different in how they relate to things. They're different in the kind of thoughts that are going through their minds. They're different in their approach to sila. And their intent with which they speak and act. Yeah, and because of this, gifts and offerings to them are much more meritorious. They kind of, even if they're not terribly good at giving Dhamma talks or running communities or writing books or having references for all of the Dhamma topics that they discuss, still they are the things that they do are untainted by greed, hatred, and delusion, by nature of having attained this level of freedom. Yeah. So now to discuss a little bit about the way the Buddha frames this enlightenment. And this is a place where kind of all of the different threads of the Dhamma are coming together. You know, you have the Eightfold Path, and there's one way of saying, in terms of the Eightfold Path, that what the eight stages of enlightenment are 8 degrees of by which you've cultivated the Eightfold Path. Like all 8 of the factors of the Eightfold Path have to be present to some degree for the first stage of enlightenment. But for the eighth, it has to be like that has to be the basic structure of your entire life is the Eightfold Path. Yeah, and so that's something that grows. Another is the 7 factors of enlightenment. And these are our 7 qualities of mind: mindfulness, investigation of states, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, equanimity. You know, these are things that ripen with a culmination of the Eightfold Path. These factors kind of grow in intensity, and when they come to fruition, there's a breakthrough to a new stage of enlightenment. Yeah. But when the Buddha specifically talked about enlightenment, like what is concrete and verifiable about each of these stages, he tended to rely on a structure called the 10 fetters. Yeah. So when he talked about the 4 main fruits, that is stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and full enlightenment or arhantship, he would designate them by how many of these 10 fetters had been cut, had been removed, had been abandoned, had been relinquished. Yeah. And when I say cut or relinquished, like permanently. The Buddha's simile was like a palm stump. So a palm tree, if you're not familiar with them, doesn't have a core. It doesn't have heartwood. You know, there's a bunch of sheaves that kind of come out, sort of like branches, but that's the structure, the trunk of the tree. And if you were to cut that down at any point, because there was no core that you've cut, it will start to grow back of its own accord. So in the Buddhist time and to this day, if you really want to stop a palm tree from growing, or a banana tree or any tree kind of like that, you have to burn the top. You have to render it, in which case it won't be able to grow back and regrow. And that was the Buddha's simile for cutting these fetters. You have cut them at the level preceding consciousness, preceding the arising even of your consciousness and your thoughts. You have cut it at the layer of the conditions that cause consciousness to arise. You have all the preceding conditions of ignorance and volition. And so it's not possible for these defilements to arise again in the future. And the 10 fetters, which you can look up, are so to I'm gonna I'm gonna use the wiki so that I get it in a particular order. I don't want to mix up the order and then mix up everybody's memory of this. So Sakaya Ditti, identity view, doubt, Vicikicca, attachment to rites and rituals, Silabhata Paramasa. Number 4 is sense desire, Kamachanda. 5 is ill will, Vyapada. 6 is lust for material existence, that is all existence that has a form. The 7th is lust for immaterial existence, so all that's based purely on the mind. 8 is conceit, 9 is restlessness, and 10 is ignorance itself. And the Buddha would talk about these fetters, and he would say that at stream entry, you cut definitively the first 3 fetters, that being identity view, doubt, and attachment to rites and ritual. If at once returning, what happens is you don't definitively cut sense desire and ill will, but you profoundly weaken them. And one way that you might think about this is because there is a difference and a hierarchy that is Mind gives rise to speech, gives rise to action. And that is the kind of progression. So thoughts, perceptions, or narratives, and then what we do in the world. Because of that, you'd say that the next stage of enlightenment doesn't remove sense desire and ill will, but it removes the capacity to act on them in a harmful way. So it doesn't make the cut at mental activity. One still technically has sense desire and ill will, but one will not act on them in terms of speech or action. They won't act out. And the Buddha, another way he says this is they don't have lust and they don't have hatred. They don't form these kind of gross material examples of sense desire and ill will. All they have is this kind of lingering background sense of, oh, I like that. I really like that. I want that. And God, I really can't stand that person. I'm just gonna go over there. Yeah. They have preferences, they have aversions and desires, but they're not going to harm anybody through them. And when one attains this stage, it's called once returning. What will happen is if they are reborn, they will only be reborn in the world of form one more time because they don't have the ability, they might have the lingering ability to, and all these bad habits that they've created in this life, but they won't be able to form new bad habits based on sense desire and ill will. So they just won't be able to feed it. They won't be able to keep it going. It'll pitter out in the next life. To go further, at the stage of non-returning, this is where one has attained some level of samadhi. That is at least a basic access to the jhanas, the levels of absorption samadhi, and enough sufficient for having experienced the ending, the cessation of sense desire and ill will. They know what it's like to not have these at all. Even little lingering background thoughts of sense desire and ill will in their thought stream. They know what it's like to cut them out. And once this is attained and made permanent, then sense desire and ill will are completely cut. And at this point, they will never again be reborn in the world of form. And so they can only go up. They will be, if they don't go any further, they would be reborn in the immaterial realms we call the pure abodes, where beings who are mentally generated and don't have a fixed form get to abide and enjoy themselves and suffer very little. Yeah. And so the Buddha would talk about these first three fruits, stream entry, once returning, and non-returning, as being based on the five lower fetters. And then he said the five upper fetters are purely the realm necessary for arhantship, for full enlightenment. Now, again, if one attains non-returning, one is in the stream and one is headed in this direction. And if they pass away, then they'll be reborn in the pure abodes. They're going to attain arhantship for sure. But what do they work at it? Do they not work at it? Does it just happen because a certain amount of time passes? That depends on the individual. But you have this desire for material forms, desire for immaterial forms, conceit, restlessness, and even the basis of ignorance itself could be lingering in the mind. And the Buddha, one simile he uses is like if a blacksmith is hammering away at a piece of red hot metal and an ember flies off into a pile of hay. Now, there's a variety of cases. One is which that ember, nestling in that bit of hay, it might smolder for a long time, close to its fuel source being the hay, not starting a fire, but just kind of like staying hot for a little while, like getting nursed along by the hay. But in other cases, it might land on a bare patch where it kind of falls through the hay and lands on stone, and it might kind of quickly lose its heat and go out. Yeah, and the Buddha uses this simile for the different kinds of non-returners. Some of them, they still have a lot of like delight in samsara, even though they don't have sense desire and ill will or any of the lower fetters. They're not in a hurry to get out. Yeah, so they're going to linger in the pure abodes. But those who work at it might attain arhanship, which is they might remove the five upper fetters, which means they'll completely purify their mind of all of the conditions which had given rise to existence in samsara. Now, at the stage that one is working at that level, yeah, these are really quite subtle. They're like very subtle things that it's hard to figure out, it's hard to find in your mind, and they're not going to be there all the time. They're gonna more, the Buddha talks about them as underlying tendencies. You'll recognize that in very specific circumstances, this kind of conceit or this kind of desire for immaterial form or this kind of ignorance might show up. Yeah. And if you work at it in the right way, then arhanship is possible. Past that, there is no further attainment. And the Buddha would also say that there is no, in terms of enlightenment, there is no difference between him and his arhat disciples. Yeah, that attainment is as far as it goes. Yeah, there's basic worldly attainments, like you might be able to further develop your samadhi or your psychic powers. You might get better at giving Dhamma talks or leading communities. You might get better at all of the Dhutanga austerity practices. And it would be a lot easier, actually. The Thai forest monk Ajahn Chah was known to say that, it's not that arahants are done like growing or learning. It's kind of like that's the beginning. They have absolutely no obstacles between them and learning or acquiring whatever talent or thing that they want to do. It's not that they just fall over and like I have no desire for anything anymore. We'll just see what happens. They often have a lot of energy, a lot of mindfulness, a lot of wisdom. Yeah, they care about people suffering, and they would like to do something about it where it's possible. Yeah. And but as soon as they reach the end of that life, then they attain what's called parinibbana, because they have nothing left to generate future rebirth. They, well, who can say? Yeah, they what we knew of them ceases. Yeah, and this leads to a particular something that I'm very familiar with in the Pali Canon, but some people pointed out, it's like, where does that come from? Again, I don't have a specific reference, but there is a difference between path and fruits. And one of the interesting things is when the Buddha talks about path, he doesn't really describe in great detail what that is. Yeah, he describes the fruits by which fetters are cut, which fetters are abandoned. But path is something that he kind of alludes to. Most specifically, he alludes to the path of stream entry, because that one he divides into, he calls them Dhamma followers and faith followers, based on whether wisdom or faith is their predominant faculty, respectively. Yeah. But one thing that he notes about them is the reason that they just enter the path is they have enough faith or enough wisdom to kind of understand that there is a problem. There is suffering. Yeah. And it's like you could describe path consciousness as a realization there is this kind of particular suffering at this level of attainment. Yeah. That the ignorance is the thing that falls away. You're no longer ignorant that there is suffering. But it's not that they've gained any specific knowledge or impulse or technique. It's more that they understand the problem, but now they have to figure out the solution. Yeah, so path in later Buddhist doctrine, there is some ideas floating around that path immediately precedes fruit. They are one mind moment and then the next mind moment, and there's no gap in between them. But the way the Buddha describes it, he says it quite differently. Like you can be on the path, and what happens is when you attain the path of a particular fruit, one of two things will happen. Either through understanding this kind of suffering, this level of attainment, through some sort of application, you reach the fruit, in which case you have that full attainment, you have that full stage of enlightenment in this very life. Or you don't figure it out in your lifetime. But at the time of your death, because of the nature of death and the way that the mind collapses into a form very, very similar to the nature of jhana, at the time of your death, you will attain that fruit at the time of your death. Yeah. In the case of non-returners, the Buddha has this turn of phrase where he's like in the interval, upon landing. It's like you could view it that they technically attain at the moment they arise in the next birth. Yeah. Because that's the first mind moment arising where they don't have those fetters. Yeah. Because the last mind moment of the previous birth, they technically still had the fetters there. Yeah, and then this is something that you could know. It's like if you get a sense, you get a sort of a insight, a breakthrough to a particular level that you've been pursuing, understanding. Like I really want to get past identity view. I really want to get past sense desire. You're really working at something. You might get a glimpse of it, and nothing will technically change, except you'll suddenly have this background knowledge of a kind of suffering. It's sort of like a loose tooth or a sliver of metal or wood that you have just under the skin. Like you know it's there, but no matter of wiggling will make it come out or stop hurting. And you don't know what to do, but it's there nonetheless. And so one thing you see about when somebody attains path consciousness is they tend to they change in a very subtle way. Yeah. And it's something that it's very hard for external people to kind of understand. There was this famous example of Sarakani the Sakyan in the time of the Buddha. So Sarakani was a Sakyan man who was kind of a drunkard, but he had faith in the Buddha. And when he passed away, the Buddha said, "Oh, Sarakani was good. He was a stream enterer." And this caused an uproar in the lay community. They're like, "Well, if that drunkard, if Sarakani was a stream enterer, then anybody, then that dog over there could be a stream enterer." And the Buddha said, "Well, yes. Yeah, yeah, if I notice that somebody's attains, faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha and has abandoned these fetters. I would even declare that those two sal trees over there are stream enterers if they had those criteria. Yeah. And so he said, it's not for you to decide. It's not for any external source to decide. Once one has entered this attainment, it's guaranteed at the time of his death, he attained stream entry. Yeah. And so this is something to understand. But then there's also the fruit itself. And again, this is not something that can be necessarily recognized or bestowed by some outside entity. Only those who've kind of gone through it will kind of recognize some of the flavor. Now, attainment experiences tend to be quite different from people to people, but it's very interesting if you read a variety of them, and they are out there. You do have to search, and it's not like there is one book where it says Arhata Maga Arhata Pala, where it's like my path to full enlightenment. But most of the time, it's kind of subtle. Like they'll talk about an attainment, and you have to kind of read between the lines, but you will start to see common themes. Mhm. Now, one thing I did want to do is many people might not be aware of this, but there is a wonderful book, a biography of the late Venerable Ajahn Chah, and it's called Stillness Flowing. It was written by one of his disciples, Ajahn Jayasaro, one of the two. And you give me a thumbs up, but I don't know which one. Oh, okay, Jayasaro. Yes. And in this wonderful book, there are a number of anecdotes that Ajahn Chah gives that give you a kind of flavor of what this experience might be like. And I thought to read it maybe to highlight the fact that these attainments, it's not necessarily that you have this thought that arises, oh, now I'm a stream enterer. Or you have an experience that's a very specific experience. It's like, oh, like in the suttas, they had the Dhamma eye opened and they knew all the things that are of the nature to arise are the nature to cease. It's not necessarily that clear cut. And so if you're wondering, like, am I a stream enterer? You might not have something to fall back on. Then you can say, well, no, concretely, like I had the thought, oh, I'm a stream enterer now, so I must be a stream enterer now. Probably, if you've had that thought don't trust it. Yeah, don't go with that. No, that's it's very possible for ideas to pop into our head that we've attained a certain level of attainment, and it's just another form of delusion. We think we've gotten something. But again, these stages of enlightenment are when something falls away. And because something falls away, there is some new way of looking at the world that becomes unlocked. And so I just thought to read this short excerpt so you can get a kind of idea of what one of these attainment experiences might be like and what kind of effect it might have on the mind. And notably, like in the days that follow this attainment that Ajahn Chah describes, he recognizes that his mind is and his thoughts are different, but it kind of fades. Yeah, and because the pressures of the world and life and needing to get food and talk to people and figure out where he's going to sleep at night, they kind of come back in and there's practical necessities that kind of reassert themselves. But though something is different, something is also changed. Yeah. And okay, so I'll read the attainment. Yeah. And Ajahn Chah says, one night there was a festival in the village. Sometime after 11 o'clock, while I was practicing walking meditation, I began to feel a bit strange. In fact, this feeling, an unusual kind of calmness and ease, had first appeared during the day. When I became weary from walking, I went into the small grass-roofed hut I was living in to sit, and then I was taken by surprise. Suddenly, my mind desired tranquility so intensely that I could hardly cross my legs quickly enough. It just happened by itself. Almost immediately, the mind indeed became very peaceful. It felt firm and stable. It wasn't that I couldn't hear the sounds of merrymaking in the village around me. I could still hear them, but I could also choose not to hear them. It was very strange. It was like when I paid no attention to the sounds, there was silence. But if I wanted to hear them, I could, and I felt no irritation from them. Within my mind, it was as if there were two objects standing there together, but no connection between them. I saw the mind, and I saw the sense object established in different areas, like a kettle and a spittoon placed beside each other by a monk's seat. I realized that if concentration is still weak, you will hear sounds, but when the mind is empty, then it's silent. If a sound arises and you look at the awareness of it, you see that the awareness is separate from the sound. I reflected, well, how else could it be? That's just the way it is. They're unconnected. I kept considering this point over and over until I realized, this is important. When continuity between things is broken, then there is peace. Formerly, there had been continuity, and now peace had emerged from it. I continued with my meditation. My mind was completely indifferent to all external phenomena. If I had wanted to stop meditating at that point, I could have done so at my leisure. Would it have been because I was lazy, because I was tired or bored? No, not at all. There was nothing of that sort in my mind. There was simply an abiding sense of just rightness. If I had stopped, it would have merely been that. There was no defilement involved. Some time later, I did stop to rest, but it was only my posture that changed. My mind remained in the same state. I reached for my pillow, intending to sleep. As I lay down, my mind was still as peaceful as it had been before. Just at that moment that my head touched the pillow, within my mind there was a sense of bending or inclining inwards. Where to, I didn't know. Then it was as if a switch was released electric power into a cable. My whole body exploded with a tremendous bang. The awareness at that moment was extremely subtle. Having passed that point, it slipped way inside to a realm of nothingness. Nothing could find its way into that place. Nothing could reach it. The awareness stopped there for a short while, and then it withdrew. I don't mean that it was an intentional withdrawal. I was merely the witness, the knower. My mind steadily withdrew until it returned to its normal state. Once my mind had reverted to normality again, a question arose. What just happened? And the answer appeared on its own. These things are natural phenomena. There's no need to be perplexed by them. Those few words were enough for my mind to accept what was going on. After a short pause, it inclined inwards again, and at a certain point it met the same switch. This time my body disintegrated into fine fragments, and I slipped within again. There was a completely impenetrable silence. It was superior even to the first time. After a certain length of time, my mind withdrew. Everything was happening automatically. I didn't exercise any will or influence on what happened. I didn't try to make things happen according to a plan. to enter that state or leave it in any particular way. I just maintained awareness. I kept observing. My mind withdrew to a normal state again, and I didn't even speculate about it. I just sat there in contemplation, and it occurred to me a third time, and the whole world disintegrated. Earth, vegetation, trees, mountains, people. Everything became the space element. It was an end of all things. That final stage, there was nothing at all. I dwelled in that state for as long as it wanted me. I don't know how such a place could exist. It was difficult to fathom, and it's difficult to talk about. There's nothing that it could be compared to. The third time my mind stayed in that realm was the longest, then when the time was up, it withdrew to a normal state. Those three times, what could they be called? Who could know? I've been describing the natural state of the mind. I haven't spoken in technical language of chittas and cetasikas because it's not necessary. I had the faith just to get down to practice, to stake my life on it. When it reached the time for this kind of thing to emerge, the whole thing turned the world upside down. If anyone had seen me then, they would have thought I was insane. In fact, with someone with no self-possession or mindfulness, that kind of experience would have driven them insane, because after it, nothing is the same as before. People don't look the same anymore. But actually, it's only you who are different, different in every way. Their thoughts go one direction, yours go in another. They talk about one thing while you're talking about another. They go up there and you come down here. You're suddenly completely at odds with the human race. Mhm. And so you got this very interesting description, and there are so many examples throughout 2,600 years of Buddhist tradition where something happens for a person, and almost always something precedes it. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Either they've heard Dhamma from a teacher, or they've been practicing in a certain way, or they've been reflecting in a certain way, and then it seems to happen unbidden because it happens at its own time, its own ripening. It's not something you can will into existence. So all those times when we've sat on our cushion, we're like, I'm gonna get stream entry, I'm gonna get stream share, and we try to will something to happen, nothing happens very appropriately because as he was saying, this is not something he could have chosen. It came about because all of the conditions had ripened, and when they had ripened, it was not even something he could get out of the way of. It ripened, it was specifically because those conditions had ripened that this experience came about. And he didn't bother to put a label on it. And it would be difficult and there would be a lot of debate to put a label on it. But one thing I would like to point out is this, again, this did not happen in a vacuum. He was practicing very diligently. But preceding this, right before it in the biography, he is reflecting on something in particular. And I think it's very interesting because it might line up with one of these fetters. Yeah. So Ajahn Chah was reflecting to himself as he's thinking about his living situation. He was like, I started thinking that it would be good to have a small novice or a postulant to help me out with a few odd jobs around the monastery. But then other thoughts started to challenge that line of thought in my head. You're really something, aren't you? Only a short time ago, you were fed up with everyone, with all your companions. And suddenly now you want to go out and find someone else? Yes, it's true I was fed up, but only with people who aren't good companions. Right now, I need a good companion. And this is the dialogue his mind is having with itself. And then his mind fires back, so where are the good people? Can you search them out? You haven't been satisfied with any of your traveling companions so far. You must think you're the only good person around to have left them behind and come out here alone. And this got him really thinking and contemplating, where is the good person? And then he realizes it's lying within us. If we are good, then wherever we go, the goodness goes with us. People may praise us or blame us or treat us with contempt, but whatever they say or do, the goodness remains. Without goodness, our mind will constantly waver. We're angered by criticism and pleased by praise. Through knowing where the good person dwells, we have a principle to rely on in letting go of our thoughts. If we go somewhere where people dislike us or say things about us, then we don't consider that to be because they are good or bad, or we are good or bad. We know that goodness and badness lies within us. Nobody can know us as well as we know ourselves. Yeah. So through contemplation, through consideration, through insight, Ajahn Chah arrives at this understanding of kind of this core of when we talk about views and we talk about like when people are like, well, what is Silabata Paramasa? What is attachment to rites and rituals? Do I still have it? Have I overcome it? What would it look like? Well, Ajahn Chah is describing a way of thinking where he's challenging his own thoughts. He has a thought, and then he's immediately challenging and saying, is that true? Is that real? Why are you saying that? Isn't this opposite of what you said before? He is recognizing the impermanence, the insubstantiality of his thoughts. His own thoughts are arguing with his own thoughts. And he's considering himself as an observer. He's like, isn't this interesting? My mind can take both perspectives at the same time, which means that neither of them is true. It's not that there are no good people, and it's not that everybody is good people and I'm the deluded one. There has to be some unifying principle beyond that. And what he arrives at is like, you can know good states, you can know good thoughts, you can know good speech, you can know good actions, and you can know that when you are doing those. And when you know with confidence that you are the one doing the good thoughts, the good speech, the good actions, then you can have confidence that those are good. And when you're doing the bad things, you can know that those are bad. And so what he's describing is cutting through Silabata Paramasa. He's cutting through attachment to rites and rituals. There's no external force that makes you good or bad. There's not even an external you. All there are good and bad actions, and that's what you could know. When there are good, you know they're good. When they're bad, you know they're bad. And through this, it should not be mysterious that through investigating in this way, through reflecting in this way, that in not a long time, he arrives at this sort of like earth-shaking, paradigm shifting experience of insight that makes no sense at all. Like his body exploded into all of these fragments and his sense base is turning on and off and he's going to a place of incredible silence. Like, he doesn't know how to quantify that. He can't talk to anybody about that. They'll think he's completely crazy. Yeah. The actual attainment is very hard to quantify, but what he can quantify is the way that his thinking is now different. And he no longer thinks his thoughts are substantial. He can challenge them. He can see that they don't represent truth. He no longer thinks that any external thing will make him good. He has to do good things personally himself to have any confidence that I'm doing good things. Yeah. And furthermore, any sense of doubt that he might have in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha or that in his own conduct has been completely dispelled. Yeah. He now has his own personal experience. Like this is just the way it is. Yeah, it doesn't matter about outside perspectives. This is just the way it is. Yeah. So I think this is a kind of it is a good primer. So there is a book where Ajahn Mahabua, a very venerable teacher, decides that okay, look, my disciples, they don't believe that arahantship is possible, so I'll tell them my entire path of practice. There's another one by a Venerable Ajahn Anan, where he describes some of his life practices. There's a bunch of biographies actually in the Thai forest tradition. They're in the habit of making biographies of their teachers and collecting up all the Dhamma talks. And so if you go pouring through one of those, you might find something that sounds a lot like, wow, it sounds like something happened to this teacher at this time. Yeah. And you could investigate and kind of try to figure out what are the characteristics, what changed, how does their thinking change, how does their conduct change? Because these levels of enlightenment, these saints, these Buddhist saints, they are actual things, yeah? And once you have this attainment, you have this attainment for the rest of your life. It doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't dissipate. Like you go back to your day job. You go back to, figuring things out in a practical sense, but your whole perspective on the world will be dramatically shifted. One thing I can say in terms of like final characteristics, you will find in the suttas, and again, I couldn't really dredge up the suttas, though I tried. I even dared to try to like ask ChatGPT or Google, and still, it's a complete mess. There's so many conflicting ideas that it could be, but there are what are called the reviewing knowledges that a stream enterer might have. And these focus mainly on understanding that they have confirmed faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, but also that they have confirmed virtue. the virtues dear to the noble ones, to the aryas. Yeah, and that's they've acquired absolute confidence in the precepts, in the five precepts as a standard for actions. They also kind of know with the attainment of those faiths and the attainment of that sila that they are no longer destined for rebirth in any of the lower realms, that is the hell realm, the ghost realm, or the animal realm. They know that they're free from the conditions that would cause that. Um, and they might not necessarily be suffused with joy or know I am a stream enterer. But yeah, they're going to have a certain confidence and a tendency to incline towards the Buddha Dhamma Sangha in various ways for the rest of their life. Yeah. In the Buddhist time, they would make this grand, may you consider me a lay follower who's gone for refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha for life. Yeah. But in the modern day, we don't take steps like that. We don't have this grand insight. For the once returner, there was a lot of mystery around this particular state because it's very hard. Again, a fetter hasn't been definitively cut, it's just been weakened. And there was a difference between them. So some once returners become celibate. They don't actually have the manifestation of desire for sexuality anymore. One would think they also don't have the manifestation of like ill will or hatred towards other beings. They're just kind of like to very tolerant. But some of them do. They still have relationships and sex lives. So the some people are like, what is this? Like, are they once returners or not once returners? And the Buddha said this is just the nature of the attainment. Some of them, depending on which faculties were strongest, will have cut the tendency completely, and some will still have the tendency. But the fetter and the has been weakened, in that way. Very similar in the way that he divides faith followers and Dhamma followers for the stream enterer. Yeah. There's some difference in their faculties that cause that difference in manifestation. But the non-returner is fairly concrete. The Buddha talks about five or seven kinds of non-returner, and that it doesn't deal with the nature of their attainment. Again, their attainment is set. It comes about through either through insight, in which they have a insight moment where they cut the fetters, based on some level of access concentration, or it comes about through following the path of samadhi to its completion. Like when you get to the samadhi attainment called the cessation of consciousness, you're guaranteed non-returning. Yeah, consciousness stops, and when it starts back up, that those fetters are cut. You're not going to go back to sense desire and ill will after that. But the Buddha says for some people, they might attain full arahantship at that point. They don't restart any of the fetters. But some of them still have underlying tendencies, or as the Buddha says, a residue remains. And he talks about the different kinds of non-returners as in how long it will take them to attain full enlightenment in their final existence. Yeah. And some of them linger a very long time, and he calls the ones who just float upstream, and that they just kind of successively are reappear in all of the pure abodes, one unto the other, for the highest and most sublime of pure abodes. But there's others who will attain arhatship immediately upon landing, some with a little bit of effort, some with a lot of effort, and some won't attain it until the end of that lifetime, but then will attain it at the end of that final life. And then they'll attain parinibbana. Yeah. But as far as the arahants, the distinction one tends to make is in the nature of exactly what kind of attainment is prevalent. So all arahants have cut the fetters. Yeah, but you do have some that are called dry insight arahants. This idea of dry enlightenment is just that they don't have samadhi as a prevalent factor. They're not suffused with the energy and joy that comes with the jhanas. They attain through wisdom. And one of these arahants describes his experience. It's like if you were very thirsty and you were to look down into a well and you were to see water at the bottom of it, and you were to feel a bit refreshed, just thinking, oh, that looks like very nice, fresh, cool water. Hades said the attainment is sort of like that. You're not worried, you're not suffering, but you don't really have access to the joy that some arahants might have if they had attained samadhi. And then you have a variety of attainments, like the triple knowledges that Buddha got on the night of his enlightenment, which were based in having access to the various jhanas. And these are not, they don't change the nature of the attainment. They just change the nature of the being that's left after the attainment, the sort of person that you still see walking around until they reach the end of their life and parinibbana. Yeah, some will have these knowledges and samadhis and psychic powers, and some of them will just be chill. They'll just be like, well, whether or not you believe it, whether or not I have any psychic powers, I'm still enlightened. And people would complain. They would go to the Buddha and say, you're saying this guy's full enlightened. He's saying he's full enlightened, but he doesn't have the jhanas. He doesn't have psychic powers. And the Buddha would say, well, whether or not you believe it, he's still fully enlightened. You say it just in that way. Yeah. And so that's the nature of the attainment. Like they know for themselves and they can't be dissuaded and there's no future existence for them. Yeah. So you just have to accept that you don't understand it yet. Yeah. So I'd say in a nutshell or briefly, it was not brief, but this is kind of what I have gleaned of the various attainments, and I'm open to questions. So as we go back and talk about it, maybe it brought up some things. And we can continue to explore because, again, this is like the meeting point of a lot of different ideas, a lot of different threads of the Dhamma. And, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the enlightenment factors and all of these different things have a play in these attainments. And all of Buddhist culture has kind of derived from the existence of these saints. They do exist. They have been part of the Sangha from the very beginning. Yeah. Um, yeah, so hopefully this is of some use. The one thing I would caution is you tend to want to develop the path, knowing that the path will culminate in the fruits. You don't focus on the fruits, thinking that that will cause you to develop the path. Getting things in the right order can be very helpful and make things a lot smoother. Yeah. But otherwise, on this full moon night, the Apostada, and the beginning of the Lunar New Year for many Buddhist countries, I offer these thoughts for your reflection.